A bill to suspend the US debt ceiling for 2 years and prevent the country from running out of money in less than a week will head to the House for a vote on Wednesday after passing the first hurdle of the House Rules Committee. Joining me with the latest news from Los Angeles is filmmaker Ami Horowitz. Ami, thank you so much for your time. President Joe Biden and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy agreed to this deal on the weekend after marathon negotiations. But it's still got some hurdles to jump through, and it might not be as easy as it seems.
Yeah, I think it ultimately will pass, and ironically, because it is actually, believe it or not, kind of narrowed the partisan divide. You actually have the hard right and hard left kind of coming together on this thing, and you have the center right and the center left coming together for the first time in, God, since I can remember. And that's a positive thing, so I think it's going to pass. But, you know, it's amazing. Whenever you have a trade in sports, you always have the sports commentator say, who won the trade? And, you know, with something like this, a negotiation, I think if both sides are unhappy, I think that means you probably cut a pretty good deal. But it is interesting. I always tell people that, particularly my friends on the right who are complaining about this deal, that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And yes, they didn't get everything they wanted, right? Certainly I understand when they say, yeah, it did freeze spending from last year to this year and only 1% for the year following. But at the end of the day, spending was so bad in 2022 and 2023. Is that really a victory? But this is as good as you could expect a deal to have been, considering the fact that the government is, the executive branch is in the hands of the Democrats, and the Senate is in the hands of the Democrats. I think this was as good a deal as McCarthy could have negotiated. And I think in particular, what it does is there's a number of these pet projects of Joe Biden, which it kind of froze in its tracks. For example, the increase in $80 billion in the IRS agents that would create equity in collecting taxes, which, by the way, essentially is code for they're going to go after conservatives who are earning money just like the Obama IRS did when he was president. It also has a moral good where it actually increased what is necessary for somebody on food stamps who is able-bodied to continue working to get food stamps up to age 54, which makes a lot of sense. The age here where one retires is 65. And it also freezes in its tracks the illegal attempt for Joe Biden to pause and forgive student loan debts. So there's a lot of good that's come out of it outside of just freezing spending, and I think it's as good as one could expect.
Yeah, that saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's good advice in life, but it's also good advice in politics, and it sounds like McCarthy has extracted a fair bit with the leverage of needing to make this deal. Let's talk about the sportswear giant LULULEMON. I wanted to ask you about this because it sounds just so ridiculous. So LULULEMON has come under fire for apparently firing employees who call the police on shoplifters. What on earth is the logic in doing that?
So LULULEMON has a zero-tolerance policy for people trying to stop thieves. Yes, that is their zero-tolerance policy, not a zero-tolerance policy for people stealing their very, very expensive goods. No, it is absolute insanity. You know, there's this fallacy that people have that corporations are inherently conservative. Nothing could be further from the truth. We see this obviously with Target and with Bud Light and go on and on and on with all these companies that have gone very woke in their policies. Even ironically, the corporations even fund the people who are trying to destroy them. If you remember, Nike and Target and everybody else was funding Black Lives Matter as Black Lives Matter were literally burning down their stores. So this is what you would come to expect from corporations in the modern world. And this story is incredible. You essentially had thieves who have broken and stolen this LULULEMON over a dozen times in the last couple of months. And they came in to steal again, and two employees valiantly, by the way, they didn't try to stop them physically from stealing, right? They actually did, they just said, hey, you guys can't do this. And they left and they walked out, they watched them leave. And then what do they do? Man, they called the police. Oh, my God, how terrible. How could you do that? How amoral of you. Yes, they called the police, and they were fired for calling the police. Where have we gone with this world? It is out of control.
So Lululemon have said in a statement subsequent, and I'm not sure whether this is an attempt to backpedal, but they've said the two employees weren't fired because they called the police, but rather they were terminated for knowingly violating the zero tolerance policy related to physically engaging with the perpetrators, putting the lives and the safety of our guests and other employees at risk. How, though, is ringing the police physical engagement? It seems like a pretty drastic way to try and protect the safety of staff and guests, and you'd think they'd want to be able to protect their own merchandise.
No, it's actually a lie. It's not true. It's not why they were fired, because they did not in any way. They did go outside to watch them leave and take photographs, but they did not physically get involved at all. They did follow the letter of the law. The reality is, why were they upset they called the police? It's because they don't want people to know that it's open season at Lululemon, and they don't want it to they don't want it, because essentially it goes on the record that the police were called at this place, and that's really what it comes down to. But for them to besmirch, not only they not laud these two courageous employees, and instead of lauding them, they fired them, and they fired them also without any kind of severance. So they really put these two people in a hole who were really trying to help, not themselves. They weren't getting anything out of this. They put themselves in a hole in order to help their company. It's really disgusting, to be honest.
It's one of those hypocritical, woke corporations that think they have a monopoly on good morals. Ami Horowitz, it's really wonderful to chat with you again. Thanks so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.